Good evening. It is Thursday, October the 30th, 2019, and welcome to Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice. My name is Professor Richard Wright, and many of you know me because you've had me in other classes. And for those of you who don't, I'll be your instructor for the next 11 weeks, and we're going to be covering many activities during the course of the next 11 weeks. This course, you should be aware, first of all, is a little different from the other courses that you've had. First of all, you'll notice that there is no textbook. You'll also notice the fact that it's more like an independent studies course, and that you are required to attend lectures the first week, the third week, the sixth week, the eighth week, and I believe the 10th week. And we're going to go over that schedule. And in between that time, you'll have written assignments, and I will provide guidance and help to you in those modules, and you'll follow the processes that I'll be setting out. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, seems like there's some ambulance noise in the background that I don't control, obviously. So let's go to the course homepage. All right, so notice on the course homepage, you'll see my name, and you'll see my phone number. You'll also see a comment which most of you should be familiar with, that students can feel free to call me, text me, or email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. Very, very, very important that you understand that I am a professor who is available to help my students as often as you need. And I do encourage you to follow that guideline. If you have an emergency situation or a situation occurs that you need an answer quickly, the best way is to text me or call me. Be sure that when you do text me, though, that you provide the course that you're in and your name, because the phone number will show up when you text me, but I may not recognize the number because I have so many students, and then I will reach out to you. You should also be aware that when you do text me, there is a very strong possibility that after you text me shortly after that, that I will probably call you, because of the fact that if you take the time to text me, that means you need something urgently. And there are times when you may be working or in a situation where you can't answer the phone. I will just leave a voicemail for you, and then you can call me back when you have time. And then, of course, if you email me, I may not see that right away, but the key thing is I'm available to help you. And sometimes I'm up pretty late. Like last night, I was up till like 3 in the morning. Tonight, I don't think I'll be up that late, but the point of the matter is that even after we finish the lecture, during the course of the week, I'm still available for you to reach out to me, and I respond very quickly to emails, texts, and definitely phone calls. I point out to you the importance of rubrics, and I'm going to be reminding you throughout this course that the rubrics are very, very, very important, because the rubrics, which are located in your written assignments themselves, provide the details for things that I require. And I'm going to be kind of sharing the importance of rubrics. And I want to remind you that all, and when I say all, I'm talking about every written assignment that you do. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about discussion posts. I'm talking about written assignments, which includes the project that you're going to have in this course, the field project. APA citations are required, as well as references, because you should be providing details about the agency or organization and the area that you are doing your report in. And you're going to see a special announcement that I have that will remind you of this. So I'm saying this to you, that as you begin to do your assignments, always keep in mind the requirements of APA. Cover page, Romans 12. And so I will provide you with the details of information about APA. Many of you are familiar with APA because you had to deal with this in your associate's program. And then critical thinking, which involves providing details and information concerning what you are analyzing with your written assignments. Don't just copy and paste material, but in this course, you're going to provide a whole lot of information that will be off, from your own experience, but you will also provide sources to support the statements because you're not an expert in the area. And even if you do work in the area, I still want to see citations. You are not the person who will be the source of citations in the body and references, but it may be a superior, someone you work with, or someone who you're familiar with in the field that you're doing your report. So critical thinking is very important in the grading of all assignments. I've already stated that APA format and kind of giving you a general description. This is the key thing that I'm looking for, citations in the body. And I will say this, I'm not talking about a citation, but citations should be throughout the body of the paper to support your statements. And then references at the end. Your citations and references should match. I'm going to do an academic integrity video in a few minutes that many of you have seen, but I'm going to show it to you again, and pay close attention to what it says about citations and references and the reason for citations and references in the paper. You also are required to provide a cover sheet for all written assignments, and then finally all assignments should be double spaced. And then this is some information that you can use, but you're all familiar with. Tutoring is also available, and here's some information about how to access a tutor. I'm going to click on a resource in a few minutes that shows you another way to access a tutor. Now let me say this about tutoring from the beginning, and that is that tutoring is not for people who are failing or struggling only. It is also to help you to prepare a really good paper. The tutors that we have been specifically trained to help you to provide details, to provide you details to help you complete a very good paper or written assignments. Now, they're not going to do the assignments for you, but what they will do is they will help you in terms of reminding you about some of the grammar issues. And if it's APA, they will explain to you or provide you with the right details so that you provide and satisfy the requirements for APA. So tutoring is there as well. And then there are some resources. Now it says going beyond the textbook. Obviously that won't happen in this course because there's no textbook. But you are going to deal with analytical tips for criminal justice students. That gets to the critical thinking issue. Importance of information literacy, searching out details and information, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes when I talk about the transferable skills. Referencing for criminal justice students, how to cite cases and things of that nature. You don't have to worry about this annotated bibliography. This critical thinking video, you can take time to look at it by copying and pasting it into your browser and then looking at it. It's a very short video, and it will give you more details on critical thinking. Rubrics are located in each written assignment and the field reports. And then the discussion post, there is one rubric. Now, while I'm on discussion posts, let me share that discussion posts are required in this course as well as the other courses you have. Tuesday nights, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, your initial posts are due, and Saturday by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, your reply post is due. Now, I encourage you to reply to more than one post. It will not increase your grade, but it helps make the discussion forum more interesting. Now, in terms of completing discussions, you should be aware that I'm looking for detailed information that indicates in your post itself that you've given it some thought, that you may even conducted some research. Citations and references are welcome but not required. And I let you know, if you have a post that says a very short one-line or two-liner, you're going to lose points, and you may even get 0 for it. And so the content of your discussion post should be detailed and analytical. And statements like "very good post" for reply post is inadequate, and you'll get a 0 for those. So you want to have details, and the rubric itself breaks it down and tells you what the information is, but also the syllabus, which every course has, including this one, will tell you also about the content of discussion posts. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about discussion posts is this, is that for each day that your discussion posts are late, you will lose 1 point. Discussion posts are due the week of the discussion forum, so therefore that is determined as Monday through Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. So your initial post, in order to receive any credit for it, must be submitted no later than Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time to receive any points. So if you do it Tuesday, you're going to, and it's of the right quality, you will receive all of your points, which would be whatever the number of points that it says that you're supposed to get for that initial post. If it's late, you will lose 1 point each day, all the way up to Saturday. Now, if on Saturday, though, you submit your initial post, and you're going to lose those points for lateness, and your reply post is submitted the next day, which is Sunday, technically the forum is over. But I usually give students an opportunity to submit a reply post, not an initial post, but a reply post, and you will lose 1 point because technically it is 1 day late. So that's the parameters for discussion posts. Each week we'll have a different topic for a discussion post, all right? And you will be given those, and you'll be able to find those in the announcement, in the module, and you'll find it on the course calendar, which we're going to discuss in a few minutes. Live lecture sessions will take place tonight, which is an open house, until roughly 10 o'clock. We should go pretty close to that time in this course. And then the remaining lectures will be week 3. So after today's lecture, you won't have another lecture until week 3. And then you'll notice it's week 6. So there's no lecture week 4, week 5. So there's week 6. There's no lecture week 7. There's a lecture week 8. There's no lecture week 9. And then the final lecture is week 10. Will take place on Thursdays, 8:30 to 9:30 or less, depending on the information. And so you should see that on your course calendar as well. Now, you are required to attend the lecture or view the archive. And each week there is a lecture, a keyword or phrase will be given, and you will be required to provide that to me. If you don't provide that to me, even if you attend, because if you attend, it's easy. If you look at the recording, then don't go look at the recording just to get that. Look at the recording to get some guidance and direction that I will share that will supplement the materials in your module for that week. And so when it says I will keep record of attendance, I will, because if you don't submit those keywords, then you will lose the points. And then each time there is a lecture, I will record the lectures as I'm doing right now, and then I will convert the lectures from WebEx to an MP4 and upload that MP4 to YouTube. So you see these announcements that you see where there's WebEx outages and videos aren't available, such as I think there's supposed to be some outages starting tomorrow. It's not going to affect you because your recording will already have been converted out of WebEx into MP4. Now, there would be two places that you'll find the recording. It's going to be down here up under the recordings, and I will email them to you as soon as I convert them. Now, be aware that it takes a little while to convert it, so sometimes it takes an hour or two, but you will have that no later than a day after, but most time it'll be really close to that. All right, so now here I am with this special announcement that I wanted to remind you that I try to keep before you, and it's in bold, and reminding you that APA must be satisfied in all written assignments. Sometimes people miss this over here, so I put it in the announcement, and that also includes the field reports. I've had students in the past that have not provided citations and references, and they've lost 5 points right off the bat. So the idea of each assignment is to conduct research, providing the sources of the information. When you provide details in your own words, the idea is from a source that you should discover during research. Even if you paraphrase, you're going to see, again, a comment about that coming up in this video in a minute. And then remember, citations provide support for the statements contained in your papers. Remember, the citations should match what's on your reference page as well. Okay, so that's what I wanted to remind you. Now, and then here's a guide to help you with APA, and I'm just going to click on this, and then I'm going to come back in a minute. This provides you with the APA guide, which provides an APA paper template and various tools that you'll need to understand APA. And then when you go further down, there is a video, all right, that you look to and you can find that will help you. And then if you go to these tabs on the left, it tells you getting started with APA, how to prevent plagiarism, videos for APA to help you with formatting, in-text citations, references, and noodle tools which help you format your papers and your cover page. Don't worry about the annotated bibliography, abstracts, and appendices, but writing in APA style is very, very, very important. Now, up at the top, you will see a tab that says APA Guide, but then there's a Library and Learning Services Guide, which if you click on that, it tells you to go to your particular school. Here it is, we're School of Justice Studies, and you click on that, and then it tells you there's a guide specifically that you use to help you, and then it tells you who our librarian is. You can have online chats with him, as well as providing details from Facebook, Twitter, and the various social media that are out there. And then there's some frequently asked questions, answers to questions. You can type a question and it'll probably pop up. Navigating the tutorial, the School of Justice Guide, and then it goes down here and it talks about research for various sources where you can find information that you need to help you complete your written assignments as well. And it goes all the way over the Noodle to citing APA, your writing, help you with your research, dealing with Grammarly, and all of those different things. How to set up your Grammarly account. Be aware that all of your papers are run through Grammarly, which is the school Grammarly. Now, if you have your own, don't use it because you want to check the plagiarism box so you can make sure that you have enough critical thinking. And then it tells you how to get live help and so forth. Tutor-match appointments where you're with a student who works with you, and then it gives the hours and so forth for chat and things like that. So that information is there as well. All right. So going back to where we were, to APA Toolkit, and it helps you to find out the information that you need. All right. So I'm going to close this one out. So now, before we do the welcome announcement and week 1 announcement, I want to take a few minutes and I want to share this brief video with you about academic integrity. And it's available also in the resources tab. And I'm going to take off my headphones and I'm going to put this in another, open up another screen, and I'm going to paste it, and then enter, and then I'm going to take off these. English is on so that you'll be able to follow it. So take a few minutes. This is about 4 minutes, and pay attention to this video very carefully, and you'll see what I was talking about.
What is academic integrity? Academic integrity is making decisions in your academic life that are based on honesty, trust, fairness, responsibility, and respect. This means being honest in the work you do, while respecting the work that others do. So what is cheating? Cheating means distributing or receiving answers or information by any means other than those expressly permitted by an assignment's requirements or an instructor. Some examples of cheating include asking fellow students for answers or copying answers during a test, using notes, devices, or materials during a test that your instructor has not approved, purchasing papers from websites or other sources, copying your classmate's work, assisting a classmate in misconduct, and other violations as noted in the academic integrity policy that can be found in all course syllabi. Always ask your professor if it's okay to use notes during the test or to work together with classmates on an assignment or quiz. Now let's talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism means using another individual's work without giving them credit or taking another person's work and claiming it as your work. Some examples of plagiarism are turning in an assignment that someone else wrote, copying words or ideas from someone else. This can be a library resource, course textbook, internet resource, or other material without giving the original creator credit, failing to put quoted works in quotation marks, or using someone else's ideas in your essays, but changing a few of the words to make it sound like the words are your own. Plagiarism is not just about written words and ideas. It's possible to plagiarize images, graphs, coding, or video as well. So how can you avoid plagiarism? Cite your sources, both in the body of your paper as in-text citations and on your references page. Whenever you want to use words, images, media, or ideas that were created by another person, you should cite that person appropriately as the source of that information.
But how does academic integrity relate to the work world? Isn't it just a college thing?
No. Integrity in the workplace starts with good practices and skills built while you are a student. Would you turn in a project document to your manager as your own when someone else wrote it? Not if you want to keep your job. Individuals can be reprimanded or even fired from their jobs for plagiarism. Following academic integrity guidelines while you are in school builds those skills and ethical practices that carry through to the workforce.
Okay, I understand how they're connected, but what do I do if I need more help?
If you have questions on the academic integrity policy, consult your course syllabus, talk with your instructor or dean, and if you need assistance with APA citation style or how to avoid plagiarism, contact the Rasmussen Library team through our live chat or schedule a research appointment on our library website or through the resources tab of your course. If you would like APA tutoring, schedule an appointment with one of our peer tutors on the course resources tab.
Okay, that's sharing with you. And if you notice, I was telling you that this is important in terms of APA as well, and the importance of APA and APA assistance. I do want to take the time to lead you to the resources tab, which I have my mouse on at the top. And when I click on it, you will see, first of all, at the right, that very same video that you just saw a few minutes ago over here as well. And you'll also see information about the online library, which can help you with your research, some more information about APA, Grammarly, Noodle Tools writing guide. And then there's other information as well, and it tells you about how to make an appointment with a librarian and optimal resume. We will be dealing with resumes in one of our modules in this course, so we'll be looking at that and dealing with jobs. Remember, this course is to prepare you for exit from your associate's program and or heading toward employment in your jobs. Okay. Now, transferable skills I want to share with you is information that we've identified at this college that employers looking for employees, and in these classes and the assignments, keep in mind that every one of these transferable skills has to do with your assignments themselves. And I'm going to talk about the transferable skills at this time to help you understand them. First of all, let's move this here. 6 transferable skills that we've adopted at the school, as I said, and they're communication, critical thinking, digital fluency, diversity and teamwork, ethics, and professional responsibility and information. And these are skills, as I said, that employers want you to have. So regarding critical thinking, which I've talked about, our definition of critical thinking is right here in front of you. Improving thinking, this is in your papers now, including problem solving and creativity by applying intellectual standards, by submitting clarity, precision, logic, and reflection. That's what I mean when I say critical thinking in terms of your papers. And again, there is a video that you can go into more details. Critical thinking is very important, and I am a natural critical thinker because I went to law school, and I was taught what's called the Socratic method, which involved these different points such as clarity, precision, logic, and reflection, giving us a chance to think about questions that are asked us, provide answers, maybe followed by another question until we ultimately have a light bulb come on and we have the answer to whatever issue that we're facing. Digital fluency is something that is taking place currently. This is something that came about years after I graduated from law school, which was 1978. There was no such thing. But digital fluency means that we want you to be able to employ and understand various tools, digital tools, to express ideas in appropriate context, such as being able to navigate systems like Word, to be able to navigate your LMS. Your LMS for this is Blackboard. Learning how to effectively and appropriately use the WebEx systems so that you'll be able to hear the lectures, as well as how to comment on things in the lectures, how to open your microphone, how to close your microphone, how to close your video, and how to make comments in the chat box and things like that. So digital fluency is something that everything is digital these days. Even reports that are done now in most employment positions use computers. And when you're in law enforcement, for example, many of the reports are now digitally generated and using computers or some system like that. And then all of you already are should be proficient in terms of recognizing that almost everybody has smartphones or tablet these days, whether it's Android, which is my choice, or Apple, which is what some younger people have chosen to use. The point of the matter is you must be able to understand how those systems are used to gather and maintain information and data. Information literacy is the third one. Recognizing when information is needed and possessing the ability to locate, evaluate, and effectively use needed information. Using credible information, not using information such as one that is not credible, that you'll hear me say, is Wikipedia. Never use Wikipedia in any of your written assignments. It is not a reliable source, and so we don't consider it as credible, and it is not one that most of us professors recognize. But the information literacy should be a credible resource. Now, we have a very good library and learning center team, and they have put together resources that will help you to be able to know what materials are credible and not credible. Some people try to use Google, and there's a lot of stuff out there that hasn't been vetted. All the materials in our online library has been vetted and looked at and determined that if it's there, it's credible for use. And then you have to appropriately use the sources of APA to be able to cite that information. So these first three, if you notice, critical thinking, digital fluency, are things that affect you as an individual. Then you're going to deal with others as well. So you're going to deal with communicating with people. That's the first one that has to do with reaching out to individuals other than yourself. So you'll display in your written and your reading and oral communication and understanding of nonverbal language. You know, you can almost inevitably know that shaking your head to side generally means no. Up and down generally means yes. And you begin to be able to see people's faces. If a person is frowning, generally that means there's an issue or a problem. If they're smiling, that means they're receptive or open. You understand those kinds of things. And then you're going to be communicating with people from various backgrounds. This is where we get into the next transferable skill of diversity and teamwork, where you're going to demonstrate empathy while working with individuals from various backgrounds, various races, various sexes, various national origins, uh, sexual preferences, and you're going to respect those individuals in terms of that. And how do you demonstrate that in this class? Primarily, you're going to be dealing with individuals through the, well, other than your field report, but within the classroom is you're going to communicate on discussion posts. You don't shoot down somebody's discussion post because you disagree with it. You can provide your side. They have a right to their position as well, but respect those individuals' positions that they have. This college is adamant about diversity and inclusion. Diversity means respecting the positions of any others, of people. Inclusion means that we don't leave them out. We take time to consider their opinions, their views, their positions, even if they don't agree with us. But we use our various approaches to work in a collaborative fashion to reach a conclusion for the better good of the world and the public. In Teamworks, you'll be working with individuals for your careers from various levels, detectives. You'll work with people in various areas, probation, parole, law enforcement, social workers, case workers, you name it, forensic with scientific people, doctors, lawyers, and paralegals, and other experts. So you will work as a team oftentimes to complete an assignment or a project. Ethics and professional responsibility is the last one, where we want you to be able to exhibit principles of conduct and professional behavior when you do something for the greater good of the world. In other words, knowing right from wrong and leaning on applying right and not wrong, and or making sure that you understand that you are not misrepresenting, or that you are not doing something that you know is a policy or rule and violating it purposely. You'll discover in terms of this particular course, as well as others in the syllabus, there is an academic integrity policy which was referred to in the video earlier, and it kind of lays out and it tells you some of the things that we expect you to do. The key thing is that if you're going to be an ethical student and you develop that as a habit, as a way of life, you're probably going to be an ethical professional as well. And so the key thing is you want to operate on the basis of ethics, and be aware that in the criminal justice area, criminal justice, especially in just one that's pointed out on the forefront, law enforcement is considered oftentimes as the whipping child when it comes to ethics, and that people are concerned about law enforcement officers doing the right thing. But that applies to all areas of criminal justice as well. And so understanding and applying ethical and professional principles of conduct. When I was a lawyer, I had a code of conduct. I, as a professor, as a teacher, operate on the basis of honesty and integrity in terms of what I do. For example, I'm not going to give you a grade just because I like you. I'm going to give you a grade based on the work that you put in. I am not going to have a situation where we might have disagreement and it should affect your grade. The work product that you produce is what's going to determine your grade. And that's why we kind of use rubrics to take it so that we're objective in it, and that we provide expectations to you guys in advance what we want you to do to maximize your points and grades. So we operate on the basis of teaching you to be ethical and professional. And you're going to hear me say this later. I produce students. My goal is ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice individuals. And so those are our transferable skills, and then it answers the question about how these skills are applied, and it tells you that in the program, as part of the capstone course, which this is, you'll have the chance to demonstrate, review on each of these skills. So when you're doing your field report, you're going to have some critical thinking, and you're going to have some communication. You're going to deal with people from diverse backgrounds and fields, and then you're going to operate in an ethical and professional fashion, so that when you do go to do your field report, you're not going to go like you're going to a day at the beach or you're just passing through. No, you go as if you are interviewing for the position, and we're going to be talking about that in weeks to come. All right, so you're going to be able to deal with these transferable skills on a subconscious basis. You're not even going to be thinking about it, but you're really going to be meeting all 6 of them as you continue to operate in your professions, as in you're doing your classes. If you want to learn more about transferable skills, then there is a guide here that you can click on, and you can take a look at that at your leisure. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about transferable skills. All right, so now let's go back and let's talk about how the announcements are. You will see special announcements and other things information-wise. The first one that you will receive is from the beginning of the course, which is a welcome announcement from me, and pay attention to each of these highlighted points that you should pay it to definitely apply. And we're going to go over the syllabus in just a minute. Your course calendar keeps you up to date about when your assignments are due, as well as your announcements, but your course calendar gives also one place where you can find your times and due dates for all assignments. General course questions, should you have one, you can type that in. It's under the discussion tab, and this is where I tell people, if you go under the discussion tab, and then you come down to general course questions, and you can type in the general course question, and then anyone can answer the general course questions as well. Okay, let me refresh that and get back down here. And then resources, I've already shown you the resources tab. The report tab is something that I don't use, but you use it to access your gradebook. Now, in your gradebook, there in the rubric, there will be a breakdown, and I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to go to the gradebook itself, just so you'll see. And I'm going to go to Full Grade Center. All right, and well, no, I'm going to be able to go to Full Grade Center. I'll go to no, I'm not going to go to grades. These are assignments that need to be graded, and this, for example, will tell you what. Okay, now I'm going to use this person's name who completed this assignment. I'm not going to show you their assignment. I'm not going to show it to you. But what I want you to focus on is this. Here, this is what I do. This is what your grade is going to look like. This is how I see it. It's on the right side. And you will see, again, a section for feedback. All right? And I will put the information in here for feedback under each section. That's where you'll see the details for comments about how the rubric is actually applied. Okay. So now let's go back to where we were here. All right, so now we have here, after that, some general information that you already knew about, information about the lectures, and so forth. And this you will have with you the whole quarter, and it will be there. Each week, there will be at least one or more weekly announcements. So for this week, it tells what Module 1 is about, an overview, and that's what we're doing of Capstone. That's what I'm talking about. And to prepare for this, you're going to look at the module and the grading rubric, which I've kind of already shown you, but I'll go over it in a few minutes again. And then it tells you to participate in the discussion assignment, relationship between the three components, and cite, as I already told you, when those are due. And then your written assignment is then versus now. And there is a rubric for that. And then I'm going to discuss the field work requirement. And then this tells you when the lecture is. Each week you'll see some information in here. And usually pay attention to the highlighted information that leads you to the specific assignment. I admonish you to start strong and finish strong. And my motto, adversity is a springboard to success. Many of you already know what that's about, but I'm going to talk about that as we conclude tonight. So now let's go and take a look very quickly at the course calendar. And here it is. And it tells you right here, let me move my head out of the way there. Okay, so if you click on it and open it up, it tells you to see the instructions in the module. Here, you open this up, it tells you the title of the post discussion forum for that week. The open house, it tells you here, and it provides you how long it's going to last. It provides you with where to find it as well, the link as well. So you already have that too from your course homepage. And then your reply post, and then your written assignment, which we'll be discussing in the rubric. These check marks under here are due dates. So how come you got one written assignment in that? Because there are two things that are due on that date. The first one is the written assignment. The second one is the key word or phrase that I'm going to give you at the end of the lectures. And you'll notice that next week there is no lecture. You see, the next lecture after tonight will be the 17th, and that'll be in week 3. And then if you go down, you'll see after that 4, 5. The next one after that is week 6, and that'll be actually in November. And then we go over to the November, and then you see the 21st is when your lecture takes place. Now, notice that Thanksgiving we don't have anything. That's the 28th. That's the last Thursday in the month of November. Then the next one we have is the 5th. And actually, when you get to December the 5th, that's the last one. Okay, and then the course completes itself December 13th. The quarter ends. All assignments will be due, and that by the 14th, if you submit something, it's not going to be graded. The 15th is not going to be graded. So the 13th is the cutoff date for these assignments. All right. Now, be aware of one thing that I want to tell you about assignments as I leave this and go to the Module 1. Assignment, we're at the midway point when we cross over into week 6. When we complete week 6, assignments for 1 through 5 will not be accepted. Now, be aware that you're going to see in a few minutes that you'll lose points for late assignments, but I'm going to talk about that in detail in just a few minutes. All right. In fact, what I think I want to do is, before I do week 1, let's go back and let's look at the syllabus real quick so you'll see, put that in context right. You see the syllabus has my name, my phone number, my email address, and then information that you already are familiar with. It tells you, too, that there is no textbook, and that usually you're involved in this course as the last or second to the last quarter as you obtain your associate's degree, or some people even have it as they obtain their bachelor's degree. And then it tells you about your due dates on posts and written assignments, which we already have discussed. It tells you, notice your assignments are discussions, your written assignments, your field work, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Your program assessment, which is week 11. And then there's another one that's in here. It's called the ACAT. We'll talk about that as we approach that time, because I have to provide you details to take that. It's not administered by the school, but it's an assessment itself. It's different from the program assessment that is referred to in this section here. And then there's live lectures as well. Now, the key thing is for you to recognize how it's broken down. You get 110 points for your discussion posts. You get 20 each week, I believe it is, or is it 10 each week? Yeah, 10 each week. 5 for initial posts, 5 for reply posts. Your written assignments consist of 300 points and generally 30 points. Your field work consists of 90 points, okay? And then your program assessment at the end is 100 points. That's the exam that you take. And then 25 points for your live lectures that you end up taking. Notice there are 5 lectures altogether, so that means you get 5 points for a total of 625 points. Now, I work on the basis of A all the way down to B- with students. I say this all the time. Never call me, text me, email me any hour to ask me questions about what does it take to get a C in my class. I will not answer you, because I don't work to produce C students. I work to produce A and B students. All right? So it's very important that you understand that. We've already talked about the transferable skills. I do want to talk about the late assignment submission policy as one of the final things that I talk about here. You'll have, as it says here, 7 days after the due date, which is Sundays, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, for written assignments, except when you get to week 11. But weeks 1 through 10. Now, each day that you're late, you lose 10% of that grade. And it says up to 7 days. However, you should be aware that if you submit a paper that's really good, on Monday, it is going to be a 90 at the most. On Tuesday, it's going to be 80 at the most. On Wednesday, 70 at the most. On Thursday, 60 at the most. Now, let me show you what 60 is. See what 60 is here? It's failing. So you don't want to do that. So the point of the matter is that you want to get your assignments in on time. I've already talked about discussion posts, so I don't have to go on that. So what I want to not go to now is letting you know that the 10% off for late assignments is not etched in stone. Here is what I can do. It says instructors may waive the late penalty or time frame in case of extenuating circumstances. And then it is me, not your dean, not your advisor, not anybody else, who decides that. They leave it to us as professors or instructors in our classes to determine what extenuating circumstances are. I will tell you right away a few things that are not extenuating circumstances. What is not extenuating circumstances is I had to work overtime. I had to work longer. What is not extenuating circumstances is I have a planned vacation and I'm not going to be able to complete my assignments on time. Not going to fly. One example of extenuating circumstances is if you're in the military. I never, ever penalize people who serve our country. I never do. I also consider circumstances such as serious illnesses, and I got to be serious illnesses, loss of family members that are, are close. If you lose your fourth or fifth cousin that you don't have a relationship with, in that kind of situation, and if you get sick seriously, those kinds of things, or if you have some further issues. There's been students who've been homeless, and we've worked with them as well. But be aware of this. I don't want to see your obituaries. I don't want your letters or notes. I don't want your orders if you're in the military. I'm going to believe you because remember what we talked about earlier, that we're going to teach you how to be ethical. That means you're going to tell us the truth and let us know what's going on. We do have, as an extenuating circumstance that happens usually about now, or may have happened in the last quarter, with our students that are down in Florida and that are located in that region there on the East Coast that might have hurricanes, and we have dealt with those extenuating circumstances as well. So again, how do you let me know about extenuating circumstances? I told you at the beginning of the course, this lecture, how you can reach me and let me know. I don't know. I'm not going to be a crystal ball reader. I'm not going to read your minds. So that's the late submission issue. I'm not going to talk about the incompletes. You can read that yourself. And the academic integrity policy, you can take time to read that as well. And it basically, one of the things that you should be aware of is when you take a test, it's a closed book test. Those assessments that you take, they're not really, it's not going to really help you because there's no books involved here, okay? There's no module that's going to tell you anything. So it's going to be based on information that you've learned already. But when I talk about that, usually, and you don't really have that too much in this course, you have usually that in other courses where you have quizzes and final exams and things of that nature. So that's where you run across those scenarios. But the key thing is that when you take those tests or exams, you're not going to have the material in front of you where you're trying to look up answers to the questions. You should have already studied and prepared for the exam. So that's how that works. So anyway, having said that, now let's go to the assignments for the week. Each week you'll have assignments, and again, it tells you in the module what your assignment is. It tells you the length of the assignment, and it gives you the requirements. Now, in addition to looking at this, the same information is found by clicking on the assignment and opening up and pay attention to the due date. And then there's a little box that says how many points. Then it tells you to view the rubric. Now here is the rubric. That's what I showed you a few minutes ago. So you'll get 15 points for satisfying these requirements, and then I'll put feedback up under that. If there's no feedback under it, that means that in a check mark, that means that you're okay in that area. But if there's a problem, I will let you know. So right away, you can see that the minimum requirement for this assignment is 3 pages. And double-spaced, it should be Roman 10. Remember I said APA required. And then it talks about APA requirements here as well. And if you don't satisfy the full APA requirements, you'll lose 5 points right off of the bat. If you write a paper and you don't have citations throughout the body of the paper, that is, I see that there are statements in there, but they're not supported by a citation in the body, I'm going to ding you some points because of the fact that you didn't follow what you learned in the academic integrity video that I shared with you earlier. So that's how each assignment. So you're going to, this section right here will change with each assignment. This section and this section remains the same throughout all written assignments. Okay. So next we go back. See what else is in there. Shouldn't be much in here for this week. Your discussion posts. We already have done that. How the 3 components work together, and how do you know what those 3 components are? You know already what those 3 components are, and you'll understand what those 3 components are as well. The live classroom lecture as well, and then you're going to give your point there from that or as well. Okay. And that's pretty much it for assignments for this week. And each week you'll look at that and then you'll see that. So next week, just to show you, since we don't have a lecture next week, I'm just going to basically just kind of like show you. So a high profile case, and it tells you the same thing. You go under the assignment and follow the rubric. Read what it says. But remember, in the rubric, it's going to tell you to explain a high-profile case of your professional choice. Explain how the action is either ethical or unethical. Now, be assured that it is required that when you do this assignment, that you also satisfy what's in the module. So that means that, and this is where students mess up with this assignment, they either don't have a 2 to 3 page paper, and they don't use one of the ethical systems, utilitarianism, formalism, or virtue ethics, which you've already studied. And if not, then you do some research and see what those are and what those mean and apply it. But students at this juncture know what they are. And I'm not going to talk to you about what that is because you've had the ethics course. All right, so that's going to be for week 2. And then you'll see in week 2 your discussion post. Notice this, that's it, because there's no lecture that week. All right, so then we'll be back for week 3. So let's go back to module 1. So now we've covered the assignments. Let's talk about the lesson content. And pretty much I'm going to talk about the project in a minute, and then I'm going to wrap up. So you take a look at the objectives to understand the trends and what the assignment is involved. So the field work component, we're going to talk about that. But these are your assignments I did, these 2 and then this. So now let's talk about this. This is so important so you understand it. Now, this is divided into, I think it's 3 weeks. Each week has a different grade. So anyway, here's what's going to happen. Your fieldwork component requires that you complete a minimum of 10 hours of fieldwork experience. If you work in a field in criminal justice, you can do it at work. with your employer. You don't have to go to another place. The purpose for the field work is to give you an opportunity to work in an area that you desire to work in after graduation, or to continue to grow in if you're working in it. The 10 hours, it says an approved agency of your choice, and you're documented as required in the modules as we come upon them. And it is important that you understand the purpose for this, and that is, again, it gives you some experience. It gives you a chance to exercise the transferable skills of communication, written and oral communication. And so you have an opportunity to shadow a professional to gain real-world experience, okay? So we recognize that classroom is not the place that you learn everything, that you learn some things by hands-on. For example, I learned how to be a lawyer because one of the things that I did was, while I was working my way through school, I worked in a law firm, and you're going to hear me talking about that in a few minutes. So I'll hold that back. But the point of the matter is that I had direct observation and had a chance to talk to people in the field, and I didn't have to prepare a paper or anything like that. But this allows you to prepare a final paper. And there are 5 steps throughout this course that you need to be aware of. So let's go step by step. First, and I've said this over and over again, and students have missed this first word, research, and identify a local criminal justice agency where you'd complete a minimum of 10 hours. And then some examples might be a police department, by completing a ride-along, a series of interviews, or shadowing a professional for the 10 hours, dealing with a halfway house to observe caseworkers managing released offenders. Now, in these situations, I have had students who had challenges to get this done because of the privacy issues. Or a court proceeding where you go to court, check on a case, and describe the parties, the information that you learn. You might even talk to the parties involved, not the defendant, of course, but you'll talk to the attorneys. You might even talk to the judge and let them know. You know, they're always happy to help students in these scenarios, or somebody you may know. And these are just some suggestions. I had a student who had a very interesting one. He wanted to pursue a career as a bounty hunter, and he did that as his report, and he gave a specific agency. Now, don't go online and research a company without actually, or organization or agency, without you actually having some input. One student just gave me a paper that was about an agency, but they never mentioned the agency. And I could tell what they had done. They never had actually done a field report where they actually went to the County of Cook Jail, or the County of Cook Prison, or the County of Cook this. And I just throw in examples. Chicago Police Department, or the Sheriff's Office, or probation officer, those kinds of things. So if you are unable to conduct your field report in a single session, you can split it up. But it's 10 hours over multiple days, because you're going to have a couple of times where you give me status as to how you're doing. And you're going to provide information which is going to require showing that you've done some research and an agency that you are consistently working in. If for any reason you have trouble identifying an agency, let me know immediately, and then we will talk and then get you off. But don't wait until late. So the first thing that you're going to do is contact the agency or letter with a phone call. Now, if you're already working there and stuff like that, And the purpose of this communication by letter is to introduce yourself, which if you're already working there, you don't really have to introduce yourself, but you can at least let whoever know that what you're going to be doing with them, and describe the purpose of whatever your request is. You might even write a communication even though you work there to whomever you're going to be working with, and set up some dates and times to complete the assignment. So you encourage, if you're going to do a ride-along or interview between the 4th and the 7th module of the class. You're not just to show up in an agency and request a ride-along, those kind of things. You're going to be very professional, remember what we talked about. The third step, at least one module before your scheduled meeting, have the agency receive the letter or email or whatever it is to the contact person that confirms the time that you're either going to do the ride-along or interview. During your ride-along, agency visit or interview, pay close attention to what's going on, ask questions, listen, observe, take notes as well. Remember, it says here, while you're conducting the field work, you're acting in a professional dress to impress. Remember, I talked about that earlier. I don't tell you how to dress, but it's naming some things here. And then remember, you're an academic representative of the Rasmussen Criminal Justice Program. So carry yourself accordingly. Also, as I remind students that you can create a contact or establish a contact for future possible job employment opportunities and or referrals. So you're going to go in a professional fashion as well. All right. The 5th step is the final step, and that is in a 2 to 3 page report documenting and describing what you observed while conducting the field work. As a conclusion to the report, you're going to write, first of all, 1 to 2 paragraphs describing how your education that you have here at Rasmussen prepared you for what type of job that you observed. And then be sure to provide the following information. Now, there should be some indication or demonstration that you researched and the agency you listed, the person, citing them. You've also used the policies of the agency, named the agency. You also some sources in the field that you are operating in general where you've done some research as well. Okay? You are strongly encouraged to schedule your field work as soon as possible, and try to take your field visit between week 4 and 7 to allow enough time to complete the process. So 10 hours is not a lot for 11 weeks, even if you did an hour a week, but you're not going to do that. So usually most people, if they do a ride-along, they might do 3 or 4 hours, and there are students who have done ride-alongs and done everything in one day. That's okay. That's okay. Now, be aware that you're going to present your first update during week 5. Week 5. So it'll be almost halfway through the course. And your final report will be due in Module 9. And that's the field report. All right? So it's very important that you understand that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me about that. Okay, so now let's talk about what I want to conclude with. I told you my motto is adversity is a springboard to success. And the reason why I say adversity is because I know about adversity. My adversity started when I was 7 years old, and I was a kid living in Chicago on the west side in an area that was, it was pretty nice at first, but then gangs came in, and the gangs were pretty tough and recruited young people, but they didn't bother me because of what I'm about to tell you. So going to specifically Memorial Day of 1957, which was May 30th, because that's when Memorial Day was celebrated back in those days. Now it's the first Monday, or last Monday in the month of May. my dad and I went to a baseball game and to see the White Sox, and we came home. And that day, we had, celebrated Memorial Day with the family, having friends over and family, and they were partying and stuff like that. They had alcohol, they had barbecue, and they were playing cards and doing all kinds of things. Well, anyway, that evening, my mom put us to bed. At that time, I had 5 younger sisters, and I was 7. So we had bunk beds in that room, and we had rollaway beds. And so sometime that night, a fight broke out in the house. Now, there was a man who lived in our house that my mother and father had met at a club, and they invited him to rent a room, and he did. Well, the fight ended up in the bedroom where we were sleeping, and the lights were turned on, which I've discovered later was my mother who turned the lights on. And I could see in the corner that the man had my father pinned in a corner, took out a knife, and stabbed him in the forehead. And the blood came pouring out, just came pouring out. And the man ran out of the house. Shortly after that, the police came, took my dad's body on a stretcher, and he walked past me. Now, I remember everything that happened that day, even now, because I have a gift that works against me in some things that are bad, called a photographic memory. So I remember that. By closing my eyes, I can see it. And as I tell you the story, I don't get as emotional because I've shared it to encourage people, but sometimes I do. So it can pop up at any time, so forgive me if it does. So anyway, my dad died, and the next thing I know, the man was back in the house. Now he was sleeping in the bed that my dad slept in with my mother. Well, I would find out that the case was dismissed, or in legal terms, nolli prosequi, not prosecuted because there was not sufficient evidence. I discovered years later that it was because it was said that there were no witnesses to what happened in there, and that my mom actually said that my father was the aggressor, which was not true. So she was in love with this guy. So what happened next after that is that, of course, we buried my dad. We continued living in the area. The guy began sleeping with my mom. And then what happened after that was terrible for the next 5 years. From 57 to 62, my mom was the victim of domestic violence at the hand of this man by the name of Webster Scott. And Scott used to beat her so bad that her face was disfigured, and I would have to rub her down with witch hazel. So it was pretty bad. So I lived through that as a kid, and it was frequent. He would go to jail, and then my mom would be right there, bring him back. If you ever take the course in domestic violence, you'll understand and know about the cycle of abuse, and that's exactly what this is, where what happens is an incident happens, the parties make up, the incidents happen, and then they make up, and then sometimes eventually the person doesn't make it out of the situation, or they're killed. Well, anyway, during those 5 years, my mother ended up having 2 more children, and 2 by this man, and they were girls. So they're my sisters. So in '62, we moved from the area because it got pretty bad. The gangs were taken over, but the gangs decided that because of what I went through that I just shared, that they would not recruit me, and I was off limits for either gang. And so, but my mom still wanted to leave the area. So we moved from a 2-flat that we owned to a single-family home in Gary, Indiana, in a nice community. And when we moved there, the beating stopped because an aunt from Michigan came and stayed with us during that time. And that aunt that stayed with us was a pretty tough character. She carried a gun. She was kind of like the Medea character that Tyler Perry has created. And my mom, along with a cousin who lived out there in Gary, uh, went in partnership and opened up a barbecue restaurant in downtown Gary at that time, which was thriving during that period. Well, anyway, my mom, had our aunt with us from the time we moved there. I think it was in let's see, I started school in the fall of 63. I'm sorry, 62, in sixth grade there in Gary, and then my aunt stayed there until the beginning of May of 63, and she left to go back to Michigan to be with her husband. Well, after that, my mom, there weren't a whole lot of incidents. There were words, but not as much physical violence. Well, anyway, coming to Memorial Day, May 30th of 1963, my mom left me in charge of the house frequently, so I was left in charge of the house on that particular day, and my mom said she was going to her restaurant. And she and Scott left out to go to the restaurant. Well, I, made sure everybody was okay at the house, cleaned up the house, cleaned up the kitchen, and ended up going to bed, and everybody went to sleep. But I woke up early the next morning to smoke that was in the house. And when I got up, I looked in the kitchen, and I saw that there was barbecue in a pot in there, and that's why the smoke was. Well, I would later find out that the reason why the stove was on is because that man, Scott, had come back into the house and left out the side door to kill us, actually. So I looked out there and I saw my mom's car pull off. And so I went and looked in her room, and her bed hadn't been slept in, but that wasn't unusual. So anyway, went about the business of going back to bed, and we woke up and was, operating in our day, the day after Memorial Day, which would have been the 31st, and two gentlemen came to the door, identified themselves as Gary police officers, and they announced that our mother had been killed and was found dead in Chicago. I started yelling out, "Scott, Scott!" And then I had to gather my wits because I looked around, and my sisters were like, they were crying, and the baby, she didn't really understand because she was not a little over a year old, and I was playing with her, I remember, on the blanket in the living room. So I had to gather my wits back together. And shortly after, sometime after that, my aunt, not the one from Michigan, but another aunt of my mother's sisters, came and got us and took us to Chicago to her house. When we got there, she sat us down and told us that we were going to be here for a while, but that they were working on finding us places to live, and that we were going to be split up. Well, that was pretty rough. We had always been together. So anyway, we were forced to clean up. We were forced to become like servants in the house, and we were treated like servants. I remember they had pizza, my cousins, who were her kids, and her family upstairs, and downstairs where we were staying in the area, there was a nice area down there, so they brought us down what was left over of the pizza and crust, and that's the way it was, those kind of things. Where we were left out of a lot of things. So at any rate, my aunt from Michigan got wind of what was going on, and she came back, and she announced to her sister that there's not going to be any splitting up of these kids. Her husband and she were going to have a house built, and we would move into that house, and we did. So I finished my school year out in 7th grade there in Chicago at a school called Dixon on the south side of Chicago, and then we moved to an area called Maple Park, which was a new and up-and-coming area in the Morgan Park area. And so the house was built on the street Bishop was the street, and here we are, where my aunt and uncle were living there, and my sisters, they shared a room. This was the second time I had my own room. When we were in Gary, I had my own room as well. So at any rate, living there, my troubles didn't end there, because my uncle and I were at odds, because he wanted me to take his name, and I didn't want to take his name because I was the only one who could carry on my dad's name of right. Well, they agreed that they were going to adopt all the kids except me. But I would find out years and years and years later that somehow they illegally adopted me without me knowing. I didn't use the name at all. And it was years later, actually when I was a lawyer, that I went to look for a birth certificate and found out that my name had been illegally changed. So I was distressed. But we got that taken care of, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So anyway, living in that house in '64, it was not so good. My aunt and uncle used to have battles. I told you how she was with the pistols. He had his guns, and he drank, she drank, they cussed. It was just really, it wasn't like domestic violence type of open beatings, but there were problems there. And I stayed out of the house as much as possible, and I would visit with friends, and I participated in youth activities at the church in the community called Maple Park United Methodist Church. Well, I formed a relationship there with the pastors and with the members of the church, and would go there. And so I had a paper route, and then I later on ended up working at McDonald's. So anyway, that's while I was in high school. So now let's go back to '64, when I was still in grammar school. Well, in '64, I would find out that Scott had pled guilty, and that as a result of that, he was going to receive something that we've heard most recently in the news, 10 years. 10 years. But his 10 years was for killing 2 people. But 10 years meant 5. And that for good behavior further, that he would end up serving 3.5 years, which is what he ended up ultimately doing. Well, I was very distressed about that. I asked questions of people, and people, would just tell me that's just the way it is. When someone tells me that, that's not acceptable, so I would continue to ask questions about that. And I found myself in a situation where I needed to know what was going on. And so anyway, finally somebody told me about these people called lawyers. So I went to school and talked to the librarian, and she gave me a book on lawyers, and I took that book home, read it cover to cover, and then the next day, anybody I met, I introduced myself as Richard Wright and said, I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, as it was, I found myself being challenged by my aunt, not the one in the house, but the other aunt that was going to split us up, and she said that I was aiming too high, that I didn't have what it took, and that I was should try to get a trade or something like that. It was pretty bad. She did everything she could to discourage me, but I never told her anything except I went on about my business and kept my silence. So what happened next is that also while I was 14 in '64 at that time, I heard this lady on the radio, and I liked her voice. So I went and found her, and I asked her to be my mother, and I told her about what I had gone through. Well, my aunt didn't appreciate that, so she tried to make it appear as if I was delusionary and all those things. But anyway, the truth of the matter was that she was covering up for what really happened. So anyway, the lady ended up becoming my friend, and I spent some time with her periodically. My aunt let me spend time with her, and we became really good friends. and she was around for my graduations and so forth. So anyway, so she didn't become my mother then. So we found ourselves I found myself in a situation where it came time when I about to graduate from high school, from Fanger High School, and I was pursuing interest in becoming a lawyer. And the school, a lot of the teachers knew at school. I was on the debate team at school, and one teacher told me I was pretty good at it. So anyway, I ended up telling my aunt. I said that I got a scholarship that the church is going to give me for 4 years, all paid. And they came to her and they met with her and my uncle and told them all they had to do was sign the papers. They refused because he didn't want to. He said he's not going to take my name, even though I did not know at the time that it really was already done. But anyway, I ended up running into a problem, and they refused to sign. So, and back in those days, 19-year-old males were still considered as minors, and all the way up until you were 21. Females were different. They were 18, and they fixed that years later. Now 18 is the age of majority. So anyway, I went through that, and my aunt decided to move out of this beautiful house and move into the inner city to chase this man. So some friends that I met while I was at the church asked their mom and dad if I could come stay with them, and I did. I moved in with them. I started school at night at a city college, junior college called Loop, which is Harold Washington City College of Chicago, registering for pre-law. And in the meantime, those same friends got me a job at a big Jewish law firm in downtown Chicago, working in their mailroom. So I was on my way. And so at any rate, I started out in the mailroom, and I got there and I introduced myself to all the lawyers as I met. It was about 40 of them at that time. It's now huge. And so at any rate, they were very nice and appreciative. And so I continued to work there, and I would dress up. Now, listen to me. Most of the guys that worked there would wear polo shirts. I would wear a white shirt and tie all the time. And I would take packages to the various clients. One of the clients I took a package to was a gentleman by the name of Ray Kroc. Those of you who may know that name, and if you don't know him, he was was the chairman and founder of McDonald's Corporation. So Mr. Kroc made me his personal manager because he liked me. He said that I appeared to be a young man who had his head on straight and so forth. In the meantime, I decided to do something, and what I did was I got married in 1970, a year after. I married the young lady who I had been dating in high school, who I went to the prom with, and then when she graduated in June of 1970, we made it known to school that we were married. Otherwise, they would have put her out before that, but she graduated, and we announced that, and then we got our own place. She started school at Chicago State University, studying to be a teacher, and I was, of course, where I told you. Well, we had a little small, modest apartment that, we had a mattress, I remember at first, a little small TV, and then the lady that I told you that I asked to be my mother was my friend. She ended up, her name was Mary D., ended up helping us by giving us the gift of 3 rooms of furniture from one of her sponsors for her radio show or TV show at that time. So anyway, but it was still pretty tough. I wasn't making a lot of money, and so she ended up going through school, and then a year after we got married, roughly 1971, in January, because we got married in March of 70, January 71, here comes our first child. It was a girl. And then in May of 72, here comes our second child, and it was a girl. And so she had to take off of school, of course, to have those kids, but I continued on. And we didn't have a car, and so I ended up taking public transportation, would have to be at work at 8:30 in the morning, and take 2 buses, and then I took the L train downtown, and I had this thing called books. There was no digital stuff, and they were big books. And so I would get to work 8:30, finish at 4 o'clock, and then have to be in classes at Loop College, which was on the other side of the downtown area. And I didn't ride anything. I would walk or run with my books and my 2 arms of books. The law firm gave me what they call document carriers to carry my books in. So it was pretty heavy. So at any rate, I would go to classes, and I would carry 12 to 14 hours, or 3 to 4 classes every semester. It was semesters then. So in the meantime, the law firm saw how I was doing, so they moved me up and gave me a position as a file clerk at the law firm. And then they continued. When something happened to the law librarian and he died, they offered me a position as a law librarian. And so I took that job, and I taught myself how to do legal research. That wasn't my job. My job was to be a custodian of the books and things of that nature, to maintain the library. But I would sit there and listen to the lawyers, and then I would also read the materials. Well, they found out I knew how to do legal research, so they ended up hiring me to another position, creating it. Basically, it was called a law clerk. Today it's called paralegal, and I would end up helping them with research, writing briefs, memos. I would go to court. I'd go to business transactions and closing. I did all of that. So I was getting my experience with the lawyers. In the meantime, I transferred from Loop to Roosevelt University, a 4-year institution, declared my major to be political science and minor accounting, business accounting as the specific area of business. And so I continued going to classes Monday through Thursday, and then Saturdays I had classes. And I would get out at 10 o'clock at night, and then would study on the train and the buses, and then get home and then have to get up the next day. Guys, during that time, I stayed on the honor roll and dean's list. It was a challenge and a struggle, but I did. And so we came to the point where I was in the college, and I had to take the law school admissions test, LSAT, and I didn't do too well. But I had trouble with the ACT and the SAT back when I took it, but it was established that I was smarter than that, and my grades were, pretty high. So I took that, and I said, I'm still going to apply to a certain school. And so I had decided what that certain school was, and that school was Northwestern University School of Law. People said, you're aiming high, man. Here we go again with that. And he says, well, okay, you need to apply to at least 3 schools. And they start naming some backup schools. I says, I'm not applying to but one. I wasn't arrogant or cocky. I was just confident. So I ended up finding myself applying to Northwestern University School of Law. The application was about 6 pages long, but I actually submitted a package that was this thick. It had all kinds of writing samples, and it had some written information concerning the challenges that I had to deal with as a child, and that I was raising kids and working a full-time job on the train, studying and was on the honor roll and dean's list. They saw my grades and everything. So I sent the package over. Now, the school had already provided information in their catalog that because there were so many students across the country who were applying for positions, they were setting up a class of 250 students, but there were thousands that were applying, and that they didn't do on-campus interviews. So I got a call at work from the law school inviting me to come because they wanted to see who was behind this package because it stood out. Nobody else had a package like that. So I went to the law school and sat in a room with 4 people, and they fired questions at me concerning all of the contents of that and asking me to elaborate on what I had gone through, and I was able to give them graphic details. And they decided, they says, okay, we'll be back to talk to you in a minute. Seems like they were gone for an hour, but maybe they were gone for half an hour or so. But they came back, and one of the people said to me that we don't make decisions about accepting students based on this process, but we will say to you this, that we do like things that we saw. We think you're a good candidate. She said, but we're going to, the guy said, we're going to send you some correspondence in the next 2 weeks that we think that you will be pleased with. Well, that was their way of telling me informally that I had been accepted. And 2 weeks later, I got the letter. So the law firm was excited. I was excited. So I went on and graduated from school with my bachelor's in political science and my minor in accounting. And I actually was close to a double major, but I needed to take 2 more courses. But when I got accepted in the class of 75 at Northwestern, class of 78, which started in 75, I said, no way, I'm out of here. And so I got all kinds of honors. I was written up in the newspaper, interviewed, and the college chose me out of 5,000 students to go to Springfield, and the governor gave me a medal and a certificate, and my name went into what's called the Lincoln Academy, and my kids we've gone down to Springfield and they've seen my name down there in what they call the Hall of Fame. So I did pretty well. So here and by the way, at that time, my first wife at that time, the mother of the 2 kids, she graduated as well with her degree. And so when I got to Northwestern, they made it clear to us that I wasn't going to be able to work at all in my first year. And so I ended up having to take a leave from the job, and I ended up letting her carry the load because she became a teacher working for the Chicago Public Schools. And so I started, going through the first year, first semester, and was doing pretty good. But then it was hinted that they were getting ready to have a teacher strike. And they did. They went on strike. Well, that put pressure on me. We ran out of our income. The lights went out. I had to study by candlelight, guys, and with flashlights. We had to eat canned goods and stuff like that. So we took the 2 girls and sent them to stay with their grandmother, which was not too far from where we live. And so by this time, I had a car. I had a little old car. It was actually almost given to me by the people I used to live with, when I stayed after my aunt. And so, in fact, it was those people that took me to get my driver's license, and I passed the driver's test. But anyway, so we ran into some problems. And so anyway, my focus became hard to maintain. So I finally told one of my professors, her name was Joyce Hughes. She presently is still at the law school teaching, and she came there in the same year that I started in 75. I told Professor Hughes I was going to take a leave of absence. She said, before you do that, come to my office, and I want to talk to you. So I sat down in her office. She stood in front of the door, and she said these words to me. She says, "I'm not going to let you out of here until you agree that you're going to finish this program, and you're not going to leave. I'll help you. I don't have money, but I will help you." So I took her up on it, and then as a result of that, I finished the program on time in 1978. The teacher strike lasted about a couple of months, and so she went back to work and so forth and so on. So I finished my first year of law school, and then in my second year, one of my classmates, actually he was a year in front of me, introduced some of us law students to his dad. His dad was a distinguished criminal defense lawyer who would later become a judge, R. Eugene Pencham, and he would become a mentor to many of us, including yours truly. Well, he invited us to his house, and several of us sat around and we talked, and he drilled questions to help us to become good lawyers. Well, after everybody left, I shared my story, and Judge Pencham said, "You need closure," so he took me to the criminal courts building and had them pull the files that related to my father and mother's murders, so that I would have that, and I have it to this day. At the same time, he also said to me, "Look, Richard, I think that you are going to probably want to maybe lean toward prosecution, but I recommend you become a defense attorney." Well, I really hadn't made up my mind, but I respected what he said, and I took him up on that. So as I graduated, he was the commencement speaker, by the way, for our graduation in 1978 in June. He he found out that the lady that was, I'm going to take you back to the lady whose house we stayed at, who was my mother's sister, the first time, that said she was going to split us up and try to discourage me from becoming a lawyer. When I made out my list to invite people to graduation, she got the first invitation, and I invited her to come. She came. I never told her. See, she saw it herself. And this was the first time, people, since my mom was killed, which was in '63, so we're now talking 78, that she acknowledged that I was her nephew. And, she made a fool of herself there. Among the people who was there was the lady that I had asked to be my mother, and she kept up with me during that time and was there to provide support for me as well. So I used to call her my mother, but she wasn't my mother at that time. So anyway, I ended up, of course, graduating, and I went back to the law firm to work at the law firm. And I stayed there for 2 years until 1980. In 1980, I announced that I was leaving because I wanted to work more in criminal law, because they were corporate law. They did little criminal cases, but I wanted to, that's what I really had in my heart to do. So I left there and started working with some attorneys, and I didn't like their ethics. So I started my own practice, Richard H. Wright and Associates, and I became very popular because I was doing radio. I came up with a show called Know Your Rights, which was spelled W-R-I-G-H-T-S. My phone number to my office was 974-4487, which spelled W-R-I-G-H-T-S. So I was doing pretty good. I hired other lawyers to work with me. I had an assistant. I also had a secretary, and I had some messengers working. So I was keeping pretty busy there. And I then began to do a little bit of entertainment law, sports law, radio TV law, because the lady that was, I called her my mother. She was on Channel 9, WGN in Chicago by this time. And so I represented her and other people as well. I did real estate. I did all kinds of things, but my heart was criminal law. So my first wife and I began to separate, and we moved in different directions, and in '87 we parted company. Now by this time, going back to '78, when I graduated, a third daughter came, and so we had those 3 girls, and so I continued to support those kids. And matter of fact, the 2 oldest ones went to high school near me, and when they were there, one of their classmates I had a chance to meet was a young man who's in the news now. His name was Robert Kelly then, but you know who it is. It's R. Kelly, and he had some personal challenges even back in those days. Well, at any rate, I continued to, I lived in Hyde Park area. Mayor Harold Washington, the first African-American mayor of Chicago, was my friend, and he lived across the park from me. And so we had some deep affiliation. I was, in fact, going to work with him until he died in '87 of a heart attack. But I helped campaign for him. Any rate, I found myself doing pretty well. So with the divorce, I ended up meeting a young lady after that, and I started representing this young lady. And then she and I got married in '88, and I moved from the city to the suburbs of Chicago, and ended up with a couple of things happening. In 1990, we had a daughter, a child. And so anyway, also in around that same time, actually '89, just late 1889, her mother became the village president or mayor of a town called Ford Heights, and she asked me to be her village attorney. And so I took that job along with still running my law office, and I became the village prosecutor. But then I said I need to carry a gun because it's a pretty tough job out here, dangerous. They said you can't carry a gun, and only police officers. So they said, if you want, you can become a part-timer. So I did. I went to the academy, did the training, took all of the classes I needed, and I ended up never wearing a uniform, but I started working with on the streets. I was in plain clothes. I also wore outfits for drug raids and street traffic stops and things like that, roadblocks. So I did some police work. I was involved later in investigations because the chief of police ended up being indicted and had to step down. And so I ended up being asked by the new chief to become his investigator. And so I became an investigator. So you'll see that I've had the hats worn of police officer, investigator, as a paralegal, prosecution, and defense attorney. So I've done all of that stuff. So anyway, I continued doing that, '89 to '93. Around late '93, I discovered that, oh, and by the way, I forgot, '91 to '93, I went to seminary and became a minister while I was married to my second wife. So anyway, I joined their church. Well, around '93, I discovered that my ex-wife, my second ex-wife, and my former pastor and her were doing their thing. You fill in the blank. And so I got a divorce from her, and it hurt me. And so with our child, they formed they created a problem with me seeing my child, and to this day I don't have a relationship with that one child. She's 29 now, or 26. I think she's 29. Anyway, she was born in 1990. So at any rate, the point, now she is 29. So at any rate, she got pregnant, had a child, and I saw my grandchild one time, and then she got married, and I was invited to her wedding by text message. I didn't go. So it was pretty bad. So anyway, back up. My wife, I met a young lady that I ended up marrying July 28, 1994. And as of the 28th of July this year, my wife and I celebrated 25 years of marriage. After that, we got married. There came my first son, who is now 24 years old, Richard Jr. You see him in that picture, and he's 6'2". And then secondly came my daughter, Julia, who's named after my wife. And then came Julian, and then he's 6'2" also. He's 19. My daughter now is nearly 20, so their birthdays overlap. And then my baby girl, she was born in 2008, and yes, I'm 69, and I have an 11-year-old baby girl, and I'm excited about that. So anyway, my wife and I, we've been together. She's stuck with me. I told her that I was going to be probably retiring from law, and that I had lost my desire to want to represent people. So I was offered the opportunity to become a judge, but I turned it down. And so in 2000, like late 1999, I announced that I'm closing. I had closed my office, by the way, and I was working from home. And I started. I had left radio, and I started winding down my practice. And so in 2000, I started doing other things. One of the things I did was teach special education at a school, and then I ran a janitorial company for a company called Service Merchandise, where I hired all the janitors in Illinois. And that went on until Service Merchandise went out of business, I think in 2002 or 3. Anyway, it went on for a couple of years. In the meantime, I started doing closings for title companies where people were refinancing their houses, and I would drive my car and go to their houses. And so I was doing fairly decent, but it was a struggle. So anyway, I found myself at the point where my wife and I, we decided we had a house in an area called Richton Park, and in 2011 we left that area. And in 2011, someone came to me and told me that there was this school that I had never heard of, and they said they were looking for someone to teach business law. And so the name of that school was, you guessed it, Rasmussen College. And so I took the job as an adjunct professor, and I was teaching business law. But I quickly made it known that I was a criminal justice person. So they moved me over into criminal justice, and I started the second quarter, because they're, as you know, Rasmussen is on quarters. And October 1st, 2011, as I said earlier, I celebrated 8 years of being at Rasmussen a couple of days ago. So anyway, I found myself working as an adjunct and wanting a full-time position, but I stayed on campus a lot, helping out, doing extra stuff while I was still doing closings on the side. And so we ended up getting rid of our house, and we rented a house out in the area, the Romeoville area, and actually Plainfield. And so we moved into that house, my 4 kids, my wife, and I. And at that point in time became, we were ministers already, but then we became pastors and started our church, God is Able Christian Church. And so anyway, we ended up living in this rented house, working at Rasmussen, struggling to pay bills and things like that. And so finally, in 2014, there became an opening for a full-time position. I applied for it. It was for State Program Coordinator for Illinois for the School of Justice Studies, and I got the job. And I started being responsible for the Romeoville campus in Illinois, the Mokina Tinley Park campus, the Aurora campus and the Rockford campus, and I used to visit and interact with the leadership of each of those campuses and help the students out. Well, the program went online just before that. About 2013, I believe it was, it went completely online, and so I had to learn about online classes. So when I became state program coordinator, I had 3 classes I was teaching, and at the same time I was doing state program coordinator work. Well, in 2015, they changed the roles and did away with state program coordinators, and I ended up becoming adding 2 more classes. So since that time, 2015, I have been teaching 5 classes. I have taught many of the same classes over as I'm teaching now, and so I have established relationships with many students. Oh, now, by the way, let me go back to why I chose to go to Rasmussen when I had never heard of. I did research, and I found out it was a credible institution because the chairman of the board of directors was a guy by the name of Dr. Henry Beanian, and I recognized the name. He was the former president of Northwestern University, not the School of Law, but of the whole university, and that was credibility for me. So I took, as I said, I took the job. So anyway, I ended up, making connections with students, forming relationships, teaching the way I do now, letting students know that I'm here to serve you and help you. And I continue doing that since that time to even now. And many of you know me from other classes, and that I operate on the basis I'm tough, but I expect you to perform well, and that I let you know that I am here to help you. I usually say that I'm the coach of this team and you're the players, and let's be victorious in every one of the challenges that you have. And the phrase student success is what comes out. And so my goal is to produce educated, professional, ethical criminal justice individuals. And I have worked hard to do that and continue to do so, and will continue to do so as long as I'm teaching at Rasmussen College. It is a great place to work, and that the mission of the school is to help students to be successful for the betterment of the community and the world, and I like it. And so I say to you as I conclude tonight, went a little longer, which I always do for the first week, let you know that I'm here for you. I say what I mean what I say, and let's just do it. I told you adversity is the springboard to success, and you see where I am now. I love my job. I've connected with students all over the country. I've mentored students. I've helped students get into law school, prepare for law school. I've written letters of recommendation, talked to employers for students, and that's what I do. So I'm here, even after graduation. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, I put in here Richard Wright, JD, and many students have become my friends on Facebook, and you see a lot about me and learn a lot about me. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you, but hey, I have to give you a key phrase, right? And the key phrase that I want to give you is ethics. That's it. So you give me that and you get your points. All right, so I'll see you not next week, but I'll see you in 2 weeks with another session. In the meantime, you know how to reach out to me, and I wish you the best, and have a good evening, guys. Good night.